Hey everybody, this is Michael David Angel, and you are watching the My Human and Me YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share with others, and join my free Patreon.
So imagine you spend 4 years of your life, right?
Right.
4 years and just hundreds of thousands of dollars building this invisible fortress to protect your career.
Yeah, the classic American dream playbook.
Exactly. You get the degree, you get the desk job, and, you're supposedly insulated from all the harsh realities of the labor market. But, and this is where we're starting today, the data from December 2025 suggests that that fortress is basically crumbling.
It's completely falling apart.
Yeah. The unemployment rate for recent college graduates just hit 5.6%.
Which is, it's a striking figure when you put it next to the national average.
Because the national average is what, like 4.2?
Right, sitting comfortably lower at 4.2%. So we're in this really unusual situation where the newest, most recently educated people entering the workforce.
The ones who did everything right.
Exactly. They're struggling significantly more than the general population. I mean, this is the highest December unemployment level for new grads we've seen since, 2020?
Yeah, 2020. And, the deeper you look at that data, it just gets more alarming for anyone holding a diploma. Because of the recent grads who actually did manage to secure a job, like 42.5% of them are working in roles that don't even require a college degree.
Right.
They're working as baristas, retail managers, delivery drivers. So they're effectively pushing non-degree holders out of those jobs while their super expensive degrees just gather dust.
It's a fundamental fracturing of the American economic promise.
Yeah.
The social contract was always, you invest the time and money in the education, and society rewards you with a stable, predictable, upwardly mobile career.
Right.
And what we are witnessing right now in real time is just the complete dissolution of that contract.
Which brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. Because look, if you're listening to this, you've probably seen those generic, dime a dozen listicles floating around online.
Oh, the top 10 jobs AI will steal article.
Yeah, exactly those. And we really want to look past that noise today.
Yeah.
We want to unpack the hard, high-authority data about career stability in this entirely new era. Like, what is actually safe? What is genuinely vulnerable? And you brought a massive stack of heavily vetted sources for us today to help figure this out.
I did, yeah. We've got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to be analyzing comprehensive labor and economic data from Pew Research, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Goldman Sachs, the World Economic Forum.
Maybe hitters.
Oh, absolutely. Plus the International Labor Organization, McKinsey, IBM, Stanford University, and this brand new, incredibly revealing study from Anthropic that just came out in March 2026.
Right.
And my goal today for you listening is to really look through the noise. This isn't about doom mongering, right? Or predicting some sci-fi apocalypse.
No, of course not.
It's about mapping a massive structural shift in how society values human skills. Every major technological revolution destroys certain paradigms and creates entirely new ones. We just need to understand the underlying mechanisms of this specific shift.
Yeah, so if you are listening to this right now, whether you're, a recent college grad staring at that 5.6% unemployment reality, or maybe you're a seasoned white-collar professional wondering how secure your desk job really is.
Or someone working out in the field with your hands.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is essential intelligence for you.
Yeah.
Because we need to start by understanding how AI has just completely flipped the script on who is actually vulnerable in the modern economy.
Right.
Because it used to be that the blue-collar worker was the one sweating when new technology rolled out, right?
Historically, yes. Think about the mechanical loom or the automotive assembly line,
Sure.
or even the introduction of the ATM. When we talked about automation in the 20th century, we were basically talking about physical, repetitive labor. The first wave of automation always hit the working class first.
The people without the expensive academic credentials.
Exactly. The credentialed desk job was the safe haven. But the data from Pew Research shows that this dynamic has completely inverted. Their analysis of U.S. labor data reveals this phenomenon that economists are now calling reverse skill bias.
Okay, let's define reverse skill bias, because that feels like the real crux of this entire issue. Are you saying that the more educated you are, the more vulnerable you are?
Precisely, yeah. The Pew data shows that workers with a bachelor's degree are more than twice as likely as those with only a high school diploma to be in jobs that are the most exposed to AI.
Wait, twice as likely?
Twice as likely. We're looking at 27% of bachelor's degree holders sitting in high exposure jobs, compared to just 12% of workers whose highest education level is a high school diploma.
That is completely counterintuitive to literally everything we've been taught. And, we aren't just talking about low-wage data entry here, right? Like, these have to be well-paying jobs.
Very well paying, and the financial discrepancy there is incredibly telling. Workers in the jobs most exposed to AI are earning an average of $33 per hour. Okay. But you contrast that with the least exposed jobs, where the average is only $20 per hour. So the target isn't the minimum wage worker anymore. The target is the comfortable middle to upper class knowledge worker.
Man. So going back to that fortress analogy from the beginning, in the past, technology was like the ground troops, right? It attacked the infantry, the manual laborers on the front lines.
Right.
But generative AI is like an airstrike. It just flies right over those physical defenses and drops a payload directly onto the command center, onto the people sitting at the desks. I could only imagine the kind of psychological toll it takes on a workforce that thought they did everything right.
Oh, the psychological impact is profound, and the surveys absolutely reflect it. According to the Pew data, 52% of American workers say they are worried about how AI will be used in the workplace.
More than half.
Yeah. And this isn't some abstract, futuristic anxiety. As of September 2025, 21% of U.S. workers say at least some of their work is now done with AI, which is a massive jump from 16% just the year prior. And almost all of that adoption growth is concentrated in college-educated workers.
But help me understand the why here. Like, why is the educated desk worker suddenly sitting right in the crosshairs? Aren't these jobs supposed to require, complex human thought?
Well, that's the illusion of white-collar work, isn't it? We assume that just because a job requires a degree and it takes place in a nice air-conditioned office, that it's inherently complex and uniquely human.
Right.
But if you break down what a knowledge worker actually does all day, it's largely based on highly predictable rules, logic, and language manipulation.
Okay, give me an example of that. What does that actually look like in practice for someone listening?
Sure. Think about a junior financial analyst.
Okay.
They log in, they pull historical market data from a database, they apply a standardized mathematical formula to it, format the results into a specific Excel template, and then maybe write a 3-paragraph summary using totally standard industry jargon.
Yeah, that sounds pretty typical.
Or take a mid-level lawyer drafting a routine contract. They're just pulling clauses from previous contracts, ensuring the terminology aligns with current legal precedent, and formatting it into a standardized document.
So they're basically acting as, highly paid information writers.
Exactly.
Taking information from column A, applying a strict rule to it, and just moving it to column B.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah.
And large language models, at their very core, are just massive prediction engines.
Right.
They're trained on vast amounts of historical data and standardized text. They thrive entirely on predicting the next logical piece of text or code based on established rules. So the more structured, documented, and rules-based a profession is, the easier it is for an AI to map it and replicate it.
Man.
The very thing that made white-collar work prestigious in the first place, its reliance on complex, codified information, is exactly what makes it so vulnerable to an algorithm that can process 1 billion parameters a second.
Okay, so we know who is vulnerable. The credentialed class executing these rules-based tasks. But I really want to talk about the scale of this, because when you start looking at the macroeconomic reports you brought in, the numbers are so large they almost lose all meaning. Like the Goldman Sachs report from March 2023. That was really the starting gun for this whole conversation, right?
It really was. Goldman Sachs estimated that 18% of all work globally could be automated by AI.
18%.
Yeah. And to put a human face on that percentage, they projected that roughly 300 million full-time jobs across the United States and Europe are exposed to automation.
300 million jobs. I mean, that is roughly the entire population of the United States.
It's staggering. And looking specifically at the U.S., Goldman estimated that 2/3 of all occupations have some degree of exposure. Within those exposed occupations, they estimate that between 25 and 50% of the actual daily workload could be seamlessly replaced by generative AI.
Now, hold on, because whenever these massive think tanks release reports, I always get just a little bit skeptical. It often feels like, abstract posturing just to get headlines at Davos. And the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs Report 2025 is a perfect example of this. On the surface, they paint this surprisingly rosy picture.
Right, the net gain narrative.
Exactly. They project a net gain globally. They estimate 92 million jobs will be displaced by 2030, but 170 million new ones will be created. So, boom, a net gain of 78 million jobs. Are they just trying to calm the markets, or is there actual truth to that?
Well, the net gain headline is mathematically plausible over a long enough timeline, sure, but it completely obscures the violent turbulence of the transition itself.
What do you mean?
Yes, new jobs will be created. We'll need prompt engineers, AI ethics compliance officers, robotic infrastructure managers.
Right.
But the person losing their job as an accounting clerk in Ohio isn't smoothly transitioning into an AI systems architect role the next morning.
No, definitely not.
The WEF report itself states that 22% of all current jobs will either disappear entirely or be radically transformed.
And they also note that 39% of the skills workers possess today will be entirely outdated within 5 years.
Exactly.
That is just a terrifying pace. Imagine going to medical school or law school, and 5 years after you graduate, almost half of everything you learned is just obsolete.
Yeah, and the International Labor Organization, the ILO, they refined this even further in their 2025 Global Index. They actually analyzed nearly 30,000 occupational tasks.
Wow.
And they're finding 1 in 4 jobs worldwide is potentially exposed to generative AI. In high-income countries like the U.S., that number jumps to 34%. But the ILO emphasizes a word that is incredibly crucial here: transformation, not just replacement.
Right, but then McKinsey takes a much more aggressive stance, don't they?
Very aggressive, yes.
Because their recent analysis doesn't talk about, gradual transformation by 2030. They estimate that 57% of U.S. work hours could be automated with the technologies that exist right now.
Right now.
Not future iterations of AI, but the tools available today. And that is double what they projected just 2 years ago. But I want to move past the projections, actually, because you brought a study from Stanford's Digital Economy Lab from August 2025. And this seems to be the real smoking gun that proves this isn't just theory anymore.
Oh, the Stanford study's pivotal because it uses empirical observation, specifically ADP payroll data covering millions of real workers to show what is already happening on the ground.
Okay.
They tracked employment trends and found that entry-level employment in the occupations most exposed to AI had actually fallen by 13% since late 2022.
And the breakdown by age and experience in that data is what really stood out to me. Software developers aged 22 to 25 saw nearly a 20% drop in employment.
Yeah. 1 in 5 young coders just gone.
But older developers in those exact same occupations actually saw their employment grow by 6 to 9% over the same period.
Yeah.
Walk me through the mechanism here. Because if AI is so magically good at writing code, why are the senior developer jobs growing? Wouldn't a company just fire everyone and let the AI build the software?
That is the perfect question, and it illustrates exactly how this technology integrates into a real workflow. Think about what a 22-year-old junior developer actually does.
All right.
When they get hired straight out of college, they aren't designing the core architecture of some massive banking application. They are assigned the tedious routine tasks. They write boilerplate code, they write basic unit tests to make sure the software doesn't crash, they fix minor, well-documented bugs.
Right. It's essentially an apprenticeship. They're doing the digital grunt work while they learn how the company operates.
Exactly. But writing boilerplate code and generating unit tests is precisely the domain where an AI excels. A senior developer, on the other hand, possesses deep institutional knowledge.
Which the AI doesn't have.
Right. The senior developer knows why a bizarre, seemingly illogical workaround was coded into the database 3 years ago just to appease a specific client. They understand the complex, messy business logic of the enterprise. The AI has none of that context.
So the senior developer doesn't get replaced. They basically get superpowers.
Precisely. Instead of the senior developer managing a team of 4 junior coders and, mentoring them and reviewing their flawed code, the senior developer simply prompts the AI. Generate the boilerplate for this new API endpoint.
And boom.
The AI outputs perfect code in seconds. The senior developer reviews it, integrates it, and moves on. They become vastly more productive, which justifies that 6 to 9% growth in their employment. The company simply needs fewer developers overall, so they keep the senior talent and completely saw off the entry-level rung of the ladder.
Which explains the 20% drop in young coders. But man, that raises a terrifying long-term question for you as a listener. If you eliminate the junior roles, how does anyone ever become a senior developer?
Yeah.
Like, if you never write the boilerplate, how do you learn the architecture?
That is the systemic crisis the tech industry is barreling toward right now, and honestly, no one has a good answer for it yet. We are destroying the apprenticeship model of knowledge work. And we're seeing the immediate fallout in the broader economic data, too.
Oh, absolutely.
The St. Louis Federal Reserve noted that unemployment for computer occupations jumped from 1.98% in 2019 to 3.02% in 2025.
And look at California, the epicenter of the global tech industry. Through July 2025, California's professional and business services shed over 46,000 roles.
Massive.
Financial services dropped 17,000. Information services lost 12,500. California's unemployment rate is now 5.5%, which is the highest of any state in the nation. Tech job postings in San Francisco are down 55% compared to pre-pandemic levels. Nationwide, U.S. employers announced nearly 700,000 job cuts in just the first 5 months of 2025. That's an 80% jump from the year prior.
Yeah. The macroeconomic data is unequivocally aligning with the Stanford payroll data. The contraction is happening, and it is heavily concentrated in the knowledge sector.
So the think tanks warned us, the payroll data confirms it, but what are the actual architects of this technology saying? Because when you listen to the CEOs who are actively building and deploying these models, they're dropping all the corporate speak and being remarkably blunt.
They really are. Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, which is, one of the leading frontier AI labs, he issued a really stark warning in May 2025. He stated publicly that AI could wipe out half of all entry-level white-collar jobs. Half. And he projected a resulting unemployment rate of 10 to 20% within a 1 to 5 year window.
1 to 5 years. I mean, in economic terms, that is the blink of an eye. And it's not just the tech visionaries predicting the future. Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford Motor Company, stated that AI will replace literally half of all white-collar workers. But the example that really chillingly illustrates how this happens is Salesforce. Mark Benioff, the CEO, announced they cut their customer support roles from 9,000 down to 5,000. 4,000 human beings let go because AI can now handle 50% of the workload. Walk me through the actual mechanism of that. Like, how does an AI replace 4,000 customer service reps?
Well, let's trace a standard customer interaction. A user buys a piece of software and it won't install.
Okay.
Previously, they'd open a chat window, and a human agent in a call center would read the complaint. The human would then search the company's internal knowledge base, find the article on installation errors, copy the troubleshooting steps, paste them into the chat, and wait for the user to respond.
Right.
That interaction takes, say, 10 minutes of a human's time.
And multiply that by tens of thousands of support tickets a day.
Right. But now, when the user types, "My software won't install, I'm getting error 404, the AI model instantly parses the natural language, understands the intent, instantly queries the entire internal database, pulls the exact correct protocol, and generates a conversational, personalized response in milliseconds.
It doesn't even need to search.
No, it instantly knows. It can handle 10,000 of those identical queries simultaneously without ever taking a coffee break. For a CEO like Benioff, looking at the operational cost of 4,000 salaries, benefits, and office space versus the API cost of the AI model, the fiduciary duty is clear.
The fiduciary duty.
Yeah.
That's the cold math of it. A corporation's primary legal obligation is to maximize shareholder value by optimizing efficiency. And labor is the most unpredictable, expensive cost center they have. Humans get sick, they form unions, they need health insurance. And AI just needs a server rack and a power grid.
Exactly. And we are seeing this exact math play out across the entire corporate landscape. Look at Klarna, the massive buy now, pay later company. They cut their workforce by 40% as they integrated AI into their operations.
40%.
Block, the parent company of Square, is cutting nearly half its workforce. Atlassian laid off 10% of its staff and explicitly stated it was to free up capital to fund further AI development.
The most jarring one to me was the leak from Amazon. Internal documents obtained by the New York Times reveal that their automation teams have a strategic plan to avoid hiring more than 160,000 U.S. workers by 2027. Avoid hiring. They aren't even firing people. They are just permanently closing the door to human labor before it even enters the building.
It is a structural ceiling being built over the labor market. The growth of a company is completely decoupling from the growth of its human headcount.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. If Dario Amodei and Mark Benioff are right, and AI can do half the white-collar work instantly and perfectly, why hasn't the entire economy collapsed already?
That's a fair question.
Right. Why are there still 5,000 people working in Salesforce customer support? Why isn't white-collar unemployment at 30% today?
That is the exact friction point that the new Anthropic research from March 2026 addresses. And this paper fundamentally changes how we measure the impact of AI. They moved away from asking, what can the AI do in a laboratory, and introduced a new metric called observed exposure.
Observed exposure. I know you mentioned they use telemetry data for this. What exactly does that mean for the listener? Are they just sending out surveys, asking people if they use ChatGPT?
No, telemetry data is much more concrete than a survey. It involves tracking the actual digital footprint of work. They're looking at software logs, analyzing when, how often, and for what specific tasks human workers are actively invoking AI tools during their actual 9-to-5 workday.
Okay.
It's the difference between asking someone if they own a treadmill and looking at their digital pedometer to see how many miles they actually ran.
Got it. So they are tracking the reality on the ground, not the marketing claims from tech companies. And what do the telemetry actually show?
The gap between theoretical capability and observed reality is massive. The paper notes that while AI could theoretically handle roughly 90% of the tasks in typical office and administrative roles, the observed usage, what workers are actually doing with it, covers only about 1/3 of computer and math jobs.
1/3?
And that is the most heavily penetrated category.
But why is there such a massive gap? If the AI is capable of doing 90% of the work, why are workers only using it for 33% of their tasks?
Friction. Corporate integration is incredibly slow and messy. Just because a technology exists doesn't mean a massive, heavily regulated bank can instantly plug it into its legacy mainframe.
Right. I mean, think about the compliance issues alone.
Exactly. There are massive concerns about data privacy, security, copyright infringement, and simple bureaucratic inertia. Furthermore, many workflows are deeply entrenched. Changing how a 10,000-person organization processes an invoice requires retraining, compliance reviews, and huge cultural shifts.
So the technology is moving at light speed, but corporate bureaucracy is still moving at the speed of human committee meetings.
Exactly, but looking at the jobs that do have the highest observed exposure is illuminating. Computer programmers top the list with 75% task coverage, meaning 75% of their daily tasks are actively being augmented by AI.
Wow.
Customer service reps and data entry workers are at 67%. Financial analysts are right behind them. This aligns perfectly with the Stanford data and the Salesforce layoffs.
But the real plot twist in the Anthropic data isn't who is exposed, it's who is entirely immune.
Yes.
You noted that roughly 30% of the U.S. workforce scored a flat 0 on observed exposure, meaning the AI is having absolutely zero measurable impact on their daily workflow. Let's look at this list of zero exposure roles, because it completely shatters the prestige hierarchy we all grew up with.
It really does. The zero exposure list includes cooks, motorcycle mechanics, lifeguards, bartenders, dishwashers, dressing room attendants, agricultural workers, courtroom lawyers.
A dishwasher and a courtroom lawyer sitting in the exact same category of AI immunity. What is the common thread there?
The common thread is the chaotic, unpredictable physical reality of the human experience. Let's break down the mechanics of this. Take the cook.
Okay.
We know an AI can generate a technically flawless Michelin star-level recipe in 2 seconds. It understands the chemical pairings of flavor profiles better than any human. But a cook in a commercial kitchen isn't just reading a recipe.
Right. They're physically holding a knife, making micro adjustments based on the varying density of a specific onion. They are managing the physical heat of 4 different pans, adjusting the flame based on the ambient humidity of the room. They're dipping a spoon into a sauce, tasting it, and realizing it needs a pinch of salt because the tomatoes in this specific batch are slightly more acidic than last week's batch.
Precisely. A language model has no body, no hands, no tongue, and no instincts. It is brilliant in the cloud, but it is entirely helpless in the physical environment of the kitchen. Or take the motorcycle mechanic. When a bike rolls into the shop with an engine misfire, the mechanic doesn't just read a diagnostic code from a digital scanner. They physically place their hand on the engine block to feel the rhythm of the vibration. They listen to the specific metallic pitch of a rattle to determine which valve is loose. They smell a faint whiff of unburned fuel in the exhaust.
They're using thousands of hours of embodied sensory data to solve a complex physical puzzle in an environment coated in grease and dirt.
And this brings us to a foundational concept in artificial intelligence known as Moravec's paradox.
Well, I've heard of this.
Hans Moravec and other robotics researchers discovered something counterintuitive in the 1980s. They realized that high-level reasoning things we consider hard, like doing calculus, playing chess, or passing the bar exam, requires relatively little computational power to automate.
Right.
But low-level sensor-motor skills things we consider easy, like walking up a flight of stairs, recognizing a face in a shadow, or folding a towel, require enormous, currently impossible amounts of computational power and robotics engineering.
So, because evolution spent billions of years perfecting our physical senses and only a few 100,000 years perfecting our logic and language, the AI is essentially working backward.
Yes.
It conquered the smart stuff first because language is just math.
Yeah.
But it has no idea how to fold a t-shirt.
Precisely. We call this the embodiment bottleneck. An AI cannot untangle a pile of wet, soapy, oddly shaped dishes in a sink. A lifeguard is safe because they're constantly scanning a visually chaotic environment glare on the water, moving crowds, splashing, and executing incredibly complex, highly physical rescues that require split-second adaptation to a drowning person's erratic movements.
And the courtroom lawyer. That's a highly educated, desk-adjacent job. Why is it zero exposure?
Because a trial is a physical embodied performance. Yes, the AI can draft the underlying legal brief brilliantly, but when the lawyer stands in the courtroom, they are reading the micro-expressions of the jury. They are listening to the slight hesitation in a witness's voice and instantly pivoting their line of questioning. They are utilizing physical presence, tone, and live advocacy to persuade human beings in real time. You cannot send a laptop to the podium to cross-examine a hostile witness.
That makes total sense. And this aligns perfectly with the Pew Research, too, which identified barbers, firefighters, and nursing assistants as the least exposed jobs. Again, deeply hands-on occupations in highly variable physical environments.
And this embodiment bottleneck is exactly why organizations like the Bureau of Labor Statistics and even Goldman Sachs in their later 2025 follow-up reports acknowledge that the aggregate labor market impacts are currently negligible on a macro scale.
Interesting.
Disruption is not uniform. The structural impacts in the physical world are years, perhaps decades, away because robotics is trailing so far behind software.
So if the physical world is safe, let's look at how that translates to the real-world job market over the next decade, because the numbers coming out of the skilled trades are painting a picture of an absolute boom.
Oh, the trades are booming. The Bureau of Labor Statistics 2024 to 2034 employment projections make this incredibly clear. Let's look at electricians as the prime example.
Okay.
The BLS projects electrician employment to grow by 9% over that 10-year span. That is 3 times faster than the national average for all occupations. They anticipate roughly 81,000 job openings for electricians every single year for the next decade.
And the compensation is totally reflecting that massive demand. The median pay is over $61,000, but top earners are easily clearing $100,000 a year.
Easily.
But let's dig into the why again, because someone might ask, why can't a company just build a robot to wire a house? We have robots building cars on assembly lines right now.
It comes back to the concept of non-standardized environments. An automotive assembly line is a perfectly controlled, highly standardized environment. The robot knows exactly where the car frame will be down to the millimeter. The lighting is perfect. The temperature is controlled. There are no surprises. Physical automation in that environment is a solved problem.
But a residential job site is the exact opposite of that.
Exactly. Imagine a 1920s house undergoing a renovation. An electrician goes down into a damp, dimly lit, cluttered basement. They have to navigate around a rusty water heater. They open a degraded electrical panel that was modified illegally by a homeowner in the 1970s.
Right.
They have to fish a flexible wire through a tiny hidden conduit inside a lath and plaster wall without breaking the structural studs.
A Boston Dynamics robot might be able to do a backflip on a controlled soundstage, but it would be utterly paralyzed by the chaotic geometry of that basement.
The physical, unpredictable, embodied work of the skilled trades requires a synthesis of physical dexterity, spatial reasoning, and real-time adaptation that is currently a robotics nightmare. Every single job site is completely bespoke.
The contrast here is just brutal when you look back at the knowledge workers. While electricians are growing at 9%, the BLS projects that data entry keyers are going to see their employment decline by almost 26% by 2034.
26%.
That is a massive drop for a profession that currently employs over 135,000 people.
Yeah.
I have to ask, if we follow this trajectory, are we heading toward a societal flip? Are we going to see a world where the kid who skipped college to become an HVAC technician ends up hiring the kid who went to an Ivy League school to do his routine bookkeeping?
From a purely economic standpoint, that scenario is highly plausible. Markets compensate based on scarcity. Right now, reliable, predictable, rules-based logic, the domain of the bookkeeper, the data entry clerk, the entry-level coder, is becoming infinitely abundant and nearly free because of AI.
Wow.
What is becoming incredibly scarce is competent, adaptable human labor in the physical world. The trades are structurally insulated by the laws of physics.
Okay, so the physical world is a massive moat against AI. But there's an entirely different frontier where the AI fails just as spectacularly and has nothing to do with hammers and wires. We're calling this the empathy moat. Let's look at sectors like healthcare, social work, and education.
These are sectors where empathy, ethical judgment, and raw human connection aren't just, soft skills that make the job pleasant. They are the actual core product being delivered.
Right. The WEF projections through 2030 show massive, sustained growth for nursing professionals, social workers, counselors, and educators. This is being driven by aging global populations, sure, but it's also driven by AI's fundamental inability to substitute for human care.
Let's look at medicine. The AI is already better at diagnosing certain things than human doctors, right?
Absolutely. An AI can transcribe a complex medical consultation flawlessly. It can ingest thousands of historical MRI scans and flag a microscopic tumor anomaly faster and with a higher degree of statistical accuracy than a human radiologist. Its diagnostic utility is incredible.
But it completely fails at the human element of medicine. Think about the reality of a hospital. An AI cannot sit in a dimly lit oncology ward with a patient who just received a terminal diagnosis and offer genuine comfort.
No, it can't.
It cannot hold a terrified toddler's hand while they get a painful injection. Or consider the social worker. An AI can process the bureaucratic intake forms perfectly. But when a social worker steps into a home, they are reading the chaotic emotional dynamics of a family in crisis. They are noticing the subtle signs of neglect that aren't on any form. They're building trust with a defensive teenager.
The analogy that comes to mind is, the AI can read the heart monitor perfectly, but it completely fails at reading the room.
That is a phenomenal way to articulate it, and it's vital to understand that this is a structural argument, not just a romantic or emotional one.
What do you mean by structural?
Care work inherently requires relational accountability. When a human being is vulnerable, when they're sick, when they are learning a difficult concept, when their family is falling apart, they do not just want accurate information. They want the profound psychological reassurance that the entity caring for them shares their human experience.
They want to know that the person treating them knows what pain feels like.
Exactly. You cannot generate relational accountability from a server farm. Humans intuitively reject simulated empathy in high-stakes, vulnerable situations. We demand a human face, a human touch, and someone who is morally invested in the outcome.
Okay, we have covered a staggering amount of ground here. We've gone from macroeconomic think tank reports to boardroom layoffs to the realities of a 1920s basement and the emotional dynamics of a hospital room. For the listener trying to process all of this, let's synthesize it into a concrete, actionable checklist. Based on all this data, what makes a job truly bulletproof in the age of AI? Let's walk through the 4 properties of AI-proof work.
The first property is physical unpredictability. This encompasses work performed in variable, highly hands-on environments.
Right. This is the trades: electricians, plumbers, emergency responders, agricultural workers, and cooks. This is perfectly corroborated by the Anthropic Zero Exposure List. If your daily workflow requires you to constantly adapt to changing physical geometry and complex sensory input, the AI cannot touch you.
The second property is genuine empathy and human connection. These are roles that inherently require trust, deep emotional intelligence, and relational accountability.
Nurses, therapists, social workers, early childhood educators. Corroborated by the WEF growth projections, if your fundamental value to society is tied to making another human being feel seen, understood, and cared for in a time of vulnerability, you're safe.
The third property is ethical judgment and accountability. This refers to positions where an individual must legally, morally, and professionally own the consequences of a high-stakes decision.
So we're talking about courtroom lawyers, chief medical officers, structural engineers who sign off on bridge designs, or master electricians who pull city permits.
Right.
An AI might be able to generate a brilliant legal defense strategy or calculate the load-bearing requirements of a skyscraper, but an AI cannot go to federal prison if it commits perjury. An AI cannot lose its medical license and face ruin if a patient dies from malpractice. An AI cannot be sued for negligence if a building collapses. The AI can make the recommendation, but a human must carry the liability.
Precisely. Legal and moral accountability is a uniquely human burden that society will not outsource to an algorithm. And finally, the fourth property, creative direction and cultural judgment.
Now, hold on. I want to push back on this one. You say creative direction, but we have all seen generative AI create award-winning digital art, write decent pop songs, and draft marketing copy.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm a mid-level marketing copywriter listening to this, I might think, well, I write clever ad campaigns. My job is creative, therefore I'm safe.
Right.
But if I look closely at this framework, I'm just producing the output. Aren't I completely vulnerable?
You have identified the exact trap that many knowledge workers are falling into right now. Yes, generative AI is exceptional at producing creative output based on existing patterns. If your job is simply executing a known process to produce a deliverable, even a creative deliverable like writing a blog post or drafting ad copy, you are highly vulnerable. Generative AI is the ultimate execution engine.
So how does that copywriter survive?
To survive, you must move upstream from the output. Property 4 isn't about generating the words, it is about the direction. It is the uniquely human capability of deciding what deserves to exist in the first place.
Okay.
The copywriter must evolve into the brand strategist who understands the cultural zeitgeist, assesses the reputational risk, and makes the subjective judgment call. This is the specific emotional message our brand needs to project in this specific cultural moment. The AI can execute the vision flawlessly, but the human must define the vision and take the cultural risk of putting it out into the world. Executing a known process is vulnerable. Taking accountable risk is safe.
Okay, so we've mapped the battlefield. We know exactly who is vulnerable, we know why, and we have the 4 properties that offer protection. Now let's deliver the playbook. What does this mean for the listener right now to survive and thrive in this new economy? Let's look at the IBM 2025 study.
The IBM study captures the sheer scale of the transition required of the global workforce. They estimate that 40% of the global workforce, which is roughly 1.4 billion people, will need to actively reskill within the next 3 years to adapt to AI and automation.
1.4 billion people. That is a logistical nightmare. But there is an optimistic data point in that same study that I think serves as the defining mantra for this era. They surveyed top executives, and 87% stated that they believe AI will augment existing roles rather than replace humans entirely.
Yes.
The quote from the report is, AI won't replace people, but people who use AI will replace people who don't.
That is the ultimate truth of the current labor market. The WEF data backs this up, estimating that 59 out of every 100 workers globally will need some form of formalized training by 2030. Furthermore, 63% of employers are stating right now that skills gaps are the single biggest barrier to transformation in their organizations. The jobs exist, but the current workforce doesn't have the modern skills to execute them.
So here is the actionable advice for you, the listener. If you are in a role that involves routine, highly codified, learnable tasks, if your daily job is producing predictable output, you need to aggressively pivot. You must move upstream. You must learn to direct the AI, become the manager of the machine, the editor, the strategist.
Right.
But if you are in a hands-on, empathy-driven or accountability-driven role, your core career is structurally insulated. Your challenge isn't survival. Your challenge is learning to use AI as a force multiplier. Let the AI handle your administrative burden, the charting, the emails, the scheduling, so you can spend 90% of your time utilizing your physical presence or emotional intelligence, which is what the market actually values.
And this brings us to what we might call the quiet truth buried in all this research. We are witnessing the complete upside-down inversion of the historical societal prestige hierarchy.
I love this concept. Explain what you mean by the inversion of prestige.
For 40 years, society, media, and the education system have relentlessly signaled that jobs involving physical labor, hands-on care, or messy human interaction were somehow less prestigious.
Right.
The skilled trades, healthcare aides, frontline caregivers, cooks, mechanics, these were often implicitly treated as fallback options for those who couldn't cut it in the knowledge economy. The ultimate pinnacle of prestige was the pristine, sterile office job, the corner office, the complex spreadsheet, the predictable, rules-based knowledge work.
And now, those exact, safe, prestigious office jobs are the ones being most aggressively targeted and automated by algorithms, while the supposedly unprestigious jobs are proving to be structurally indestructible. The Anthropic data explicitly proves this. The workers who are most at risk of having their tasks automated today are older, more highly educated, and currently earn 47% more than their counterparts who have zero exposure to AI.
It is a profound historical irony. The very credentials that were meant to serve as a shield have become a target on their backs. Now, we must be absolutely clear, this does not mean college is dead. The college wage premium, The statistical reality that bachelor's degree holders earn significantly more over their lifetimes than high school graduates remains a reality
Well, yeah,
today.
the degree still
Uh,
opens doors.
mm.
But the nature of where the value lies is shifting aggressively. The value of a human worker is migrating strictly to what the AI cannot do. We've been told our whole lives to learn to code. That was the ultimate advice of the 2010s. Should the new advice for the listener be learn to care or learn to build?
I believe it must be a synthesis of both. The ultimate career mode isn't about rejecting technology and becoming a modern Luddite. It is about aggressively doubling down on your own humanity. It is about combining the immense, cheap, instantaneous processing power of AI with human accountability, physical intuition, and genuine emotional connection. You let the AI do the calculating, the summarizing, the boilerplate coding, and the drafting, while you do the caring, the physical building, the cultural leading, and the risk-taking. You leverage the machine to elevate your humanity.
Well, this has been an incredibly enlightening, if somewhat dizzying, conversation. Thank you for helping us break down the mechanisms behind this data. It's a massive amount of information to process, but I think having the hard data and understanding how the technology actually interacts with the economy strips away a lot of the vague anxiety and replaces it with an actionable map.
It was my pleasure. The structural shift is massive and unavoidable, but understanding the underlying mechanics of it is the first critical step toward building long-term career security.
So I want to leave you, the listener, with a completely new question to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. We've mapped out how the economic value of human labor is shifting almost entirely away from routine cognitive tasks and toward physical presence, hands-on problem solving, and raw emotional empathy. If that structural shift is permanent, how long until our entire education system completely fractures under the weight of it? Will we see a future where high school shop class and rigorous emotional intelligence seminars become the highly exclusive, incredibly expensive Ivy League prerequisites, while traditional computer science and accounting degrees are treated like elective typing classes from the 1990s? Something to think about as you plan your next career move.